Hello, guys, and welcome back to the With a Minute to Go podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video if you do enjoy it, and turn notifications on so you don't miss a thing. You can also find us on Spotify by typing in With a Minute to Go or by clicking the link on our social medias, Twitter and Instagram at WAMTGpod. It's been a couple of weeks since our last episode. Obviously, like I've explained over Instagram, we were very busy with a number of different things, so we weren't able to record. We'll try and minimize those weeks, but I think there's some points where it's just not possible to record. So the last thing we want to do is rush something. We want to provide good content for you guys. So at the end of the day, there's no point in releasing an episode just for the sake of it. Anyway, as usual, we're joined by Matt. Just quickly, recreational football is back this week. I'm assuming you've had a pretty busy week with it.
Yeah, it's been a busy week. It's been great. It's been great to see everyone being able to get outside and play or back in their teams and start training again. Everyone's obviously missed it. So, good to be back out on the grass.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's all well and good watching football, but I know for me, I've got training tonight with my team and I'm very much looking forward to that. So it's good to get everyone back out and about again. Before we get into today's episode, I think we'd both like to send our best wishes to Claude's family and AFTV after the terrible news of his passing earlier this week. He'll be, sorely missed by everyone, not just in football, but, just in general. So this is episode 1 of a new series that I'm introducing called the 5-Year Rebuild. So we'll be running it every other week with a normal episode in between. However, if the demand does go up, I'm happy to do, continue with these for the next few months up to the Euros, obviously, and then that will take over as our main topic. Now, the rebuild is a very simple concept. Each week we pick a team to rebuild. There'll be 5 sections that make up the episode. So I'll be looking at the current squads, determining who will or who will not be there in 5 years' time, potential areas for improvement and transfers, alongside league positionings, cup results, young players to look out for, and maybe a potential change in manager. So for episode 1, what better team to start with than a team we both support? Obviously a very successful club who've struggled in the last 10 years to maintain their status as a title contender, sniffing out the Champions League places and relying heavily on 1 or 2 superstars to provide domestic cup success that the club have so desperately needed. So this is the 5-year Arsenal rebuild. We'll start off with the squads. I put these together. I think it's worth saying Matt hasn't had too much input on this episode for other reasons. Most of this has been my doing. Any queries or questions or, any disagreements, I'm happy to answer any questions over on Instagram or reply to anything that we put up. Right, I'll just go through the names that I've put together first. I'll start with the players that I think will remain and will be there in 5 years' time. So, Leno, Gabriel, Tierney, Maitland-Niles, Partey, Smith Rowe, Saka, Martinelli, Willock, Balogun, and Aziz, a young player. So that's 11 players there. A lot of players will be leaving. I've got 21 players here on this list that I think won't be there in 5 years' time. So we'll start Matt Ryan, Renarson, Holding, Chambers, Murray, Louise, Bellerin, Cedric, Xhaka, Elneny, Ceballos, Odegaard, Pepe, Willian, Nelson, Lacazette, Aubameyang, Nketiah, Guendouzi, Kolasinac, and Saliba. There's a lot of names there. Matt, is there any that you'd switch over from the start? Is there any that you think maybe? I'm probably looking towards the names like Saliba, Nelson, Guendouzi, still young players, still time to get back in Arteta's good books and maybe make a name for themselves at Arsenal.
I think, to be honest, a lot of them. I think in the remain category, first of all, I think in 5 years' time, I'm not sure Bernd Leno will still be Arsenal goalkeeper. I think he's 29 at the minute, so we're looking in 5 years' time, 34. I would imagine that he would have moved on or certainly not be a number 1 goalkeeper at Arsenal anymore. Saliba's the interesting one for me. Will always be the one, highly talked of, but hasn't really happened under this current manager. Now, whether a change of manager, who knows what will happen, could change things, or whether he'll be sold before Arsenal get to that stage, that might take the decision sort of away from him. So Saliba one, certainly. Guendouzi is another interesting one because he's such a young player, and it was really strange. His first season at Arsenal, it was a very mixed views from the fans. A lot of fans really liked him. They liked he was tenacious, passionate, aggressive, great energy around the pitch. And to be fair, I thought quite good on the ball as well. Obviously, had it fallen out with Mikel Arteta and has subsequently gone out on loan to Hertha Berlin, which I think he's been a little bit hit and miss. I think he has a bit of an issue with off the field, his conduct and maybe not keeping his mouth quiet when he probably should. A player I do like, and as I say, when I was in the camp, I really liked him when he played for Arsenal. But I know a lot of Arsenal fans felt that when he played, we regularly lost. And he wasn't disciplined enough to play for Arsenal. So that'd be an interesting one for me. The rest of them, yeah, pretty similar. What I've seen from, look at them and look at ages. I think what I see from Martin Odegaard, especially in recent weeks, if Arsenal were ever able to make that sort of a permanent transfer, which is looking unlikely currently, he would be someone that you'd say, you'd like to have him around in 5 years' time. But I think what it's going to heavily focus on is the young players that you've had in the Remain category, the ones that have come in this year and done really well. Smith Rowe and Saka obviously spring to mind. Martinelli, who hopefully after his international break will get a bit of a run in the side. Kieran Tierney, who's still fairly young and been good. Gabriel is a new signing, 23 years old. So those sort of younger players. I'm not sure about Joe Willock. He hasn't really had the desired impact, I don't think, at Newcastle. And that's a big loan for him, because anytime you get a Premier League loan, you've got to be proving that you can do it week in, week out, and you're going to come back into Arsenal's team and do it. Because it does come a stage where these young players, as much as they've come through the academy, once they haven't really cemented down a first team place, or that they're not in the starting sort of in the 18 regularly, then you do question whether it is time for them to move on. So he'd be another one. The big question is over Balogun. The hype and the talk around this kid is massive, and we've seen him in a couple of Europa League games where he's come on and scored goals, and looks like a clinical goal scorer. But again, it's still very young. Still a lot of players ahead of him in terms of the experience, Lacazette and Aubameyang currently, and I know he's probably maybe being a little bit ill-advised at the minute, or maybe getting a bit impatient. So we'll see what happens with that one. But that one, I think either he'll be gone in the summer or he'll be signing a 5-year contract. I think there'll be no in between. So, and he'll be a first-team player next year. So interesting ones there. I think the majority of the leave ones shows you where Arsenal are as a club at the minute. A lot of stopgap players are looking there. We can read through a lot of them that stopgap, or players that are getting to the other end of their careers. You look at Louise and William, for example. They're the ones. The only other one I look at is Nicola Pepe. He's not an older player. The outlay of money spent on him, suggests the long-term, place at Arsenal. It's what money they can potentially get for him going forward. So that'd be an interesting one. But again, he'd be 30 in 5 years' time. Is that a player that Arsenal will look at having there? Possibly not.
Yeah, all good points there. I mean, for me, it was very tough looking at this, and obviously, like you've said, there's a few players in there that could be either side. For me, Willock was very difficult. I've put him in the Remain last minute. He was in the leave for me, but I just think if he can come back and kick on, I've seen enough to see. He has a little bit of potential there. Hopefully, Arteta can work on his game with him. Obviously, like you said, we've seen Balogun in the Europa League, and if we can keep hold of him, I believe in 5 years it will be a very good, solid Premier League striker. It will just be interesting to see his progress over that time. Guendouzi as well, like you said, he's had a very public falling out with Arteta, and he went out on loan. I think it was after that Brighton game when Maupay scored the last-minute winner, and he wasn't too happy about that. Guendouzi for me, I love him as a player. I think you're right in saying technically he's very good. I remember one game last year. I think it was Arsenal at home to Villa, and we were 2-1 down, and ended up winning that 3-2. And even though Aubameyang, was the main goal scorer in that game, he really carried the team and sort of performed like a captain. And at that time, I remember discussing it with you and a few others that maybe he could be a future Arsenal captain. So in that time, it has been a big change for Guendouzi, and it would be disappointing from my point of view to see him leave. But I do believe that maybe if Arteta does stick around, that there won't be a place for him in 5 years' time. The other interesting one for me is Ainsley Maitland-Niles. Now, he's made it quite clear, I think, that he's not happy as a utility player or as a defensive player, and that's why he got that move away to West Brom, and he's been playing midfield for them. Could you see him maybe in 4 or 5 years heading up that Arsenal midfield? I mean, personally, for me, he's probably not quite there yet. I'm not sure if he could be, but you never know with these players. There's quite a few players here. Obviously, I was mentioning Miguel Aziz as well as a youngster that could be there. But Maitland-Niles, yes or no?
For me, his best position is as a fullback and probably as cover for fullback. The fact he can play right back, left back, or left wing back, we've seen him play, and right wing back. I'm not sure he's at the level that Arsenal should be looking for in terms of a midfield player. For me, now if he's got that ambition to go and play in central midfield, which obviously he's publicly said, then I think he could do a job in a lower team for sure, but probably not at Arsenal. I think his move to Southampton probably fell through because he wanted to play in midfield and they wanted to bring him in as a fullback cover or play fullback week in, week out. So, but there'll come a time where he'll realise that maybe is his better position. And he has put in some great performances for Arsenal as a fullback, which obviously isn't necessarily his natural position. But for me, he's got some good attributes, but I don't see him being, if Arsenal are looking to push on and progress, which obviously they should be, I don't see him being a part of the midfield in the years to come.
Yeah, definitely. I've got to agree with you there, really. I remember the FA Cup final back in August when he played left wing back, and he was very good there. But Arteta's moved away from that back five, and I don't think we'll be seeing it again anytime soon. And it's not really the Arsenal way of going about it, especially at home, and not really away either. So it's a difficult one. I'd like to see him stay and sort of fight for his case in midfield, but you just don't know. You don't know with all these players, and that's why it's a prediction for us for 5 years' time. Be interesting to see who's there or who's not. Right, we'll move on then to potential transfers. I've written a few positions down here that we could potentially strengthen. I mean, like you said with Bernardo there, for me, he could still be first choice in 5 years, but obviously 34 years old. He'll be coming towards the end of his career. I know Arsenal persisted with Petr Cech for a few too many seasons, and that didn't really pay off. So maybe they'll be looking for a younger model of Leno who's been pretty good in recent times, really. I've got a few suggestions down here before we move on to the one that you just added. David Raya, a solid keeper. I've seen bits of him for Brentford in the Championship. He's only 25. Obviously, in 5 years' time, he'll be 30. Again, is that potentially too old for you, or have you seen enough to maybe bring him in at Arsenal?
I think age-wise, that wouldn't be an issue. I think, look at goalkeepers tend to play on longer. I think once you're getting 34, 35 years old, I think for a club like Arsenal that want to really push on progress, I think, look at someone a bit younger. I think I like David Raya. Obviously, the club have been linked with him heavily through the summer window and briefly again in the January window before they brought in Matt Ryan. I think that link's come through the goalkeeper coach. Obviously, he was at Brentford before he come across to Arsenal, and obviously knows David Raya really well. He's been a consistent performer for Brentford. Great shot stopper, reactions, agility. Typical Spanish goalkeeper, you could say. Not necessarily massively big, 6'1", I think, 6'1". Probably not as good with the ball at his feet as you would think. And that's where I'm going to sort of focus my thoughts on the goalkeeper. And that's another one for Leno, really. We've both seen enough of Leno. or we've both seen enough of Arteta's Arsenal to know that he wants to play from the back. He wants our goalkeeper to be the 11th outfield player. And Leno's okay, but not much more than okay. I think probably Emi Martinez was better with the ball at his feet. And I think that was visible when he come in the side, that he was more comfortable with the ball at his feet, picking passes, not just to his fullbacks or his centre-backs, but playing further high, playing the ball higher in midfield. You know, I'm going to go at, obviously the one I've just added on there is someone who I think is very good with the ball at their feet, very young at the minute, playing Premier League, and that's Meslier at Leeds. I think he ticks all the boxes for Arsenal. If we're saying, you know, in 5 years' time, you're looking at Meslier being an accomplished, experienced Premier League goalkeeper. You know, I can't see Leeds wanting to replace him at the minute. The only way, you know, he wouldn't be playing is if he went somewhere else and was a number 2. But at the minute, for him being a number 1 in a Premier League side is a great experience for a young man. He's got a sweet left foot, you know, but he's got some fantastic attributes. And if I'm looking at Arsenal in 5 years' time and he was the goalkeeper, I'd be absolutely delighted. You know, because I'm seeing some great things from him this season, and he's really stepped up. So for me, there's an obvious one, and one going forward that could be great for the club. If he's going to continue to sort of develop and improve as he has, would fit the profile in terms of how Arsenal want to play, would fit the profile in terms of the age of a player as well. So yeah, for me, someone like Meslier would be a great signing. But again, look, you know, we can say it's about every position. 5 years' time, lots of things could change. You know, someone could come through that we haven't thought of, or there's certainly many keepers from abroad. I like the fact that Arsenal could maybe look at a goalkeeper who's played in the Premier League, has that experience. And who knows what will happen with Leeds? You know, are they a European side next year or in 2 years' time? Does he gain some European football there? You know, do Arsenal look at replacing Leno sooner rather than later, which could be a possibility? I'm not sure this window, because I think they're going to have to focus elsewhere. But it could be, you know, in 12 months' time that they're thinking about the summer window and maybe bringing in someone like Meslier to play every week.
Yeah, 100%. I think from what I've seen of Meslier, and obviously we'll touch on him later in the scout, it's been fantastic for Leeds this season. Obviously, he came in off the back of some poor performances from Kiko Casilla a couple of years ago, and never really looked back. He's been superb from what I've seen in the Championship, and then he's carried that form up to the Premier League with obviously a Leeds side that, like we seem to mention every week, have such a temperamental defence, and he's coped very well as a young man. So yeah, if he was in goal for Arsenal in 5 years, for me, I'd be very pleased with that. I've got to agree with you there. My other option, I've just looked up his age, and he's actually 28, which very much surprised me, but he does have Premier League experience, is Sam Johnston. Now, maybe not for 5 years' time, but maybe in the next couple of years, could you see him, maybe not at Arsenal, but you know, a much higher Premier League club?
Well, his performances this season suggest that he is a Premier League goalkeeper, and he's not going to be one next year if he stays with West Brom. So
Yeah.
he's 100% proved this year that he can do it. I think he's been exceptional. The England call-up was well deserved. I'm ashamed, you know, it's a shame he didn't get any minutes, but a great experience. Like you said, 28. He's probably gone under the radar a little bit, but obviously did really well for Villa in the Championship, then done well for West Brom, and has now made the step up to be Premier League player. So I wouldn't be surprised if there was club sniffing, you know, his performances. Maybe someone like a West Ham, who are obviously doing really well this year, Fabianski, but he's getting on now, 35, I think. You know, so it could be someone. I've seen actually Spurs as well linked with him, and I know they're linked with Nick Pope as well, to possibly replace Hugo Lloris. So, you know, there could be an opportunity for him in one of those clubs for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like I said, I'm a big fan of him, and I mentioned him a couple of weeks ago on the North versus South episode that we did, and he was my nomination. I just think he's had a fantastic year for, obviously, a well-documented struggling West Brom side. Right, enough of goalkeepers, but I think Meslier would be a good shout from you, and yeah, I'd be very pleased to have him in there. A few more positions that I've put down. We'll start with right back. I've got a few names in here. I think I might be right in saying Lamptey signed a new contract quite recently. So I don't think that would be a viable option for Arsenal. The other two that I've got James Justin, and one we've been linked with in the last few days a bit more is Achraf Hakimi from Inter Milan. Now, for me, he'd be a great replacement for Hector Bellerin if he does depart and go to PSG or Barcelona. Out of them three, who's the one you like to see at Arsenal, or who's the most likely you think to see at Arsenal?
Well, I mean, I think they're all good options, and they're all slightly different in what they do. Like you said, Lamptey signed a new contract, but are you talking about in 5 years' time? Then, you know, maybe there's an opportunity for him. I think the dream one for everyone will probably be Achraf Hakimi. I think I think we've seen, especially over his loan spells with Borussia Dortmund, obviously again playing at Inter Milan this year, that he could be one that, like you said, could come in this summer and be a replacement for Hector Bellerin, who looks like he's on his way out. That would be fantastic. And I say at 22 years old, he's got unbelievable experience. You know, played over 100 games between Inter Milan, Dortmund, and Real Madrid. So, you know, there's some serious, you know, pedigree there. But again, it's a bit strange. He hasn't really played much for Real Madrid, so I'm not sure what will happen there. Now obviously, now at Inter Milan, whether they're gonna be happy just to move him on, I'm not sure. But James Justin provides us something a little bit different. Obviously, been at Leicester and done really well. Can play left back as well as playing right back. Done a bit of both this year. You know, I spoke about Lamptey on the podcast before. I really like him. I think we spoke a couple of weeks ago. We watched him on his debut. You know, really good player, technically very good. And I think they're all different options. For me, Hakimi a first choice, if not someone like a Lamptey. And then, you know, James Justin, you know, nothing wrong with being third to those two in front of him. But Lamptey's someone that obviously needs more experience. I can see sign a new deal at Brighton and play week in, week out. And, you know, he's so young still. If he can get over his injuries and get a full season or two, he could be someone, you know, we're looking in 5 years' time that could be at a club like Arsenal. But in the immediate future, if Arsenal were able to tempt, you know, Hakimi across from Inter Milan as a replacement Bellerin, you look at both fullback areas then for Arsenal and you think, wow, you've got some real quality in those areas.
Yeah, 100%. I think for me, obviously, you got that sort of, you know, English tax on Lamptey and Justin that might cost a little bit more. In 5 years' time, might be a bit more of a viable option. That's what we're obviously talking about. But if we're looking at right now, for me, Hakimi's got to get in there and maybe cement his place for the next few years. I think there's quite a good amount of options in there. Obviously, if we do keep Cedric for the next few years, it'll be a decent backup. But then I think in 5 years, he won't be there. So a lot can change. And at the end of the day, Lamptey could move on from Brighton and get snapped up somewhere else. Same with Justin and same with Hakimi, really. So it's just our predictions. And at the end of the day, I think we could get Hakimi this summer if Bellerin does leave. The other two, for me, in the next 2 or 3 years, probably not an option for Arsenal. Right, centre backs, a position that for Arsenal are notoriously weak. Out of all our squad, I've only kept one, which is Gabriel, and even for me, on his day, he can be slightly dodgy. I've got a few names here. I think you said you don't really know too many of them, so we'll focus on Kagler Soyuncu from Leicester. Now, for me, very impressive the last few years. Obviously, he had an injury, but he's come back from that. He's been fantastic again. Would you like to see, you know, Soyuncu at Arsenal? And if not, who else would you think could be a partner for Gabriel at the back?
I'm not so sure on him, to be honest. When he first come to Leicester, his first season, I thought, yep, you know, this lad's got something about him. Physically, good size, defensively very good, but I know he's had hit and miss this year with injuries. But for me, I'm not sure he is the answer for Arsenal as a centre back. Personally, I think Arsenal probably need a better ball playing centre back. You know, I think Gabriel, has actually done well. I think he's had a little spell in the team where he wasn't great and he did get left out, and Pablo Mari come in and also did well. But you know, since he's come back in the team, I think he's been good. I think he's an aggressive player. He's aggressive in the air, left-footed centre half, which is massively important for me to have that balance in the team. So, Arteta prefers the four and to find a right-sided centre-half who's a ball player. I'm not so Sunku, for me, is the answer for Arsenal. Again, look, he's not old at all. He's only 24. So long term, could he potentially be an option? Maybe, but I think Arsenal look probably for that ball playing centre half. If you look at the minute, David Luiz is getting the nod. Okay, and a lot of people do question David Luiz defensively, but I think on his day, I honestly believe if he has one of his better games, he's superb. He's reading the game, positional sense, again on the ball, exceptional. So I think they've got to look not for a David Luiz type, but I can see why David Luiz is playing at the minute, and that's the sort of player that they'll want a ball playing centre back. Yeah,
I think that's fair enough, to be honest. You're right in saying David Luiz is getting favoured, heavily over Rob Holding, who's, in my opinion, a very different centre back. Not as comfortable with the ball at his feet. I think that's fair to say. The other few we've got down here, Demirel from Juventus. He's only 21. Lots of potential from what I hear. Obviously, I don't know a great deal about him, so I can't comment too much. And Ben White as well, from Brighton. I think he had a season on loan at Leeds, and he's been fantastic for Brighton this year. Is he another one that maybe you could see in at Arsenal? Because obviously, I think he's a fits the bill of being a ball playing centre back. So maybe he'd fit right in at Arsenal.
100%. The issue is, I think there's a good chance that he will go somewhere else. Probably, I think Man United are currently linked with him. I think, Liverpool were heavily linked with him last summer. Obviously, Leeds were as well. Leeds wanted to bring him in, and Brighton said, no, we're going to play him every week. And he decided he was going to stay there, or that's sort of how it happened. But, I mean, he was fantastic for Leeds in the Championship. He's come back this season to Brighton. And he's played, 28 league games. So he's played nearly all the games. Brighton haven't been fantastic, but again, experience for him playing in the Premier League, to making that step up now from the Championship, where obviously won promotion. So I think he's the one that's probably on a lot of clubs' radars. And look at Man United, they're currently linked with him, and they certainly need a centre back, I think, to play alongside Harry Maguire, which is where they seem to be going. So, one certainly that would be good for Arsenal, but whether Arsenal get beaten by another club to them, I'd imagine that's probably the case.
Yeah, I think it's sort of, in the last 10 years, Arsenal have really lost that ability to attract the top players. We've seen it time and time again. I think it's quite well documented that Wenger has a long list of players that he could have signed but hadn't for whatever reason over the last sort of 15 years as well, really. So that might be an issue when it comes to Ben White. So maybe I think over the next couple of years, maybe someone like a Soyuncu or a Demirel. Obviously, the other one I've got down here is a 17-year-old French defender, Ismail Doucouré, and we sort of know how young defenders have gone down at Arsenal and Saliba, and that's not too well. So you never know. I think there's a lot of options here. I think there's a hell of a lot more that Arsenal are probably interested in that we haven't mentioned. So I'm just hoping in 5 years' time we've sort of secured that area, because especially in January we've let a lot of players go. Mustafi, Socrates, the two notable defenders, and obviously Kolasinac on loan. I think Arteta is looking to really reshape that back line. So yeah,
let's have a. But that's the thing I think which is frustrating with William Saliba is why can't he be the ball playing centre back, the right sided centre back to partner Gabriel long term? I think I think all Arsenal fans would love him to be given an opportunity to show what he really can do. Now we don't know what's going on behind the scenes, and things may have happened, and obviously he's now on loan at Nice for the rest of the season. Seems like he's doing quite well over there. So, but I honestly believe that he should be given a run and an opportunity to get into that back four. I think very highly rated. Arsenal paid I think 30 million for him. And he was a very young player. We've seen obviously his centre back partner from St Etienne Wesley Fofana do so well for Leicester, and although that doesn't mean it's a given he's going to do well, I think, you know, if Arsenal are going to make a decision, which I imagine they will this summer, that they need to go and buy, you know, not just in 5 years' time, but buy a centre back long term that's going to partner Gabriel, because I believe he will be a long term player for Arsenal. Then why not give him a go? Why not give someone a go? A young lad who's had first team experience at a couple of clubs and, you know, has been brought in for big money. Surely before you can dismiss him, he needs to have a run of games, and he hasn't. I don't. Has he made his Arsenal debut? I don't think he has.
I think he played in pre-season once, but obviously that's not enough, is it? So
he played away at Milton Keynes maybe in a pre-season game. Yeah. So, you know, for me, I'd love to see him get a run of games in the side. I'm surprised he's out on loan, and I know there's some personal stuff at the beginning of the season. I think he possibly lost his mother. You know, in the height of the pandemic. So, obviously difficult time for him. It's been a difficult time for Arsenal as a club. But, I mean, if he could come back and get himself in the team, maybe they don't need to look at bringing in another centre-back.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I've got him down in the pile to leave the club, but there's nothing I'd love more than for him to come in and take an opportunity and really cement that place in the Arsenal team, because at the end of the day, that's what we want to be seeing. We want to be seeing those young players coming through. Obviously, we've got Gabriel, who he signed last year, and yeah, he has his off days, but I suppose I'm being a bit harsh because he's a young player and he's got a lot of time to get better. So maybe him alongside Saliba could be a good option for Arsenal. Move on to midfielders then. I've only got a couple of names here. One's slightly more defensive. I've got a picture in my mind of one sitting next to Thomas Partey and then the attacking play going on in front of them, and the other one is a slightly more attacking option. We'll start with the defensive option, though, and that's Yves Bissouma from Brighton, and he's really impressed me. I think he's the complete player. The last sort of 6-7 months, I've seen enough evidence to say, yeah, he can be in a top 6 club quite comfortably. And I think next to Partey, I think there's something we're lacking at the moment. We've got a lot of combinations, El Neni, Ceballos, Xhaka, who at times, like you say, we're raving about them, but then the next week they'll have a terrible game. And for me, Bissouma's been very consistent for Brighton, and I think, I'm not sure what you think, but I think he could be a very good option for Arsenal, certainly going forward in the next 5 years.
I think he'd be a player I'd love to see at the club. You know, I think the frustration is that Arsenal don't bring in enough Premier League players or proven players. Arsenal don't dine at the top table anymore. We're not Champions League club. We haven't necessarily got the pulling power of, you know, the Man Uniteds and Liverpool's currently, Manchester City. So Arsenal got to look in the second tier. And there's no disrespect to Bissouma, but, you know, I think if Man City were looking to probably get a centre midfielder, you know, they would probably looking at the next sort of bracket, the next tier. But again, 3 seasons in the Premier League, I think this has been his best. I think it's been superb. Again, I'd love to see him play alongside Thomas Partey. I think for all Arsenal's defensive issues and woes over, you know, not just recent times, but going back quite a while now since they had a proper centre-back pairing and a proper midfield pairing. I think if you had him and Thomas Partey together in midfield, it gives license for the rest of the team now to go and attack, having a front four that, you know, if I'm talking about Arsenal, current Arsenal, you're looking at a front four of Saka, Odegaard, Smith Rowe, Lacazette, Pepe, Aubameyang, maybe even Willian. But, you know, you know that you're going to be solid defensively, plus with Tierney and hopefully a new right back bombing on, you're giving yourself the sort of foundations in 2 good centre backs and 2 great midfielders to hold, be defensive and allow the rest to go and play and be attacking. So, I mean, I think he'd be superb for Arsenal, not just in 5 years. I know that's the whole point we're talking is a 5-year build, but you know, in the immediate future, you've reeled off centre midfielders that probably run their course at Arsenal. You know, Xhaka, El Neni, even Dani Ceballos, who, you know, I don't think his loan will probably be extended again for another season. I'm not sure Arsenal will pay money for him. You know, I think he again flatters to deceive. So, you know, someone like him, you know, I don't know how much it would cost to take him off Brighton's hands. You know, he signed on a 5-year deal in 2018. So he'd be someone that definitely be superb for Arsenal in midfield.
Yeah, I think the last sort of 5-6 years that the recruitment has really reflected on the team's performance. It's just been a a very quick downward spiral for Arsenal. And like I've said, El Neni, Xhaka, Ceballos just don't really cut it for Arsenal. You look at all the players they've had over the last 20 years, you can reel names off like Vieira, Fabregas in midfield, and they're just a different bracket of player compared to the current players. The other one that I was going to move on to is Emi Buendia from Norwich. Obviously, he's a slightly more attacking option. I saw a lot of him in the Premier League in 1920. He looked all right. He wasn't a standout. For me, the standouts were people like Cantwell and Max Aarons, who hasn't actually gone on to do too much in the Championship. Buendia this year, he's been fantastic. I watched him quite recently, scored a very decent goal against Brentford. Overall, I know Norwich fans will be very much hoping to keep him, and they're in a very strong position here to go up to the Premier League this year. In the next 4 or 5 years, could you see him as a candidate for that attacking midfield role, maybe to provide some competition for players like Smith Rowe? And like you said, if we do sign Odegaard, I think that would be a fantastic trio of players for Arsenal in the attacking line.
Yeah, well, I think what I've seen of him, I've really, really liked, albeit a lot of it this year in the Championship, but, 1 in 3 for goals, lots of assists. I think he could be someone that Arsenal could bring in and instead of Odegaard, because again, that transfer looks like it's up in the air if Arsenal are looking to even make that a permanent one. So again, exactly what I said about Eid Basuma. Could he be not the top option, but an option that Arsenal could certainly get and be favourites for? And I'd imagine he would jump at the chance to come back to or come to Arsenal, albeit he'll probably be in the Premier League with Norwich this next year, the way they're going at the minute. And obviously we'll be spoken in our Championship episode about how well they've been doing. So I think he could be certainly someone with great technique, finds those pockets of space, an Arsenal type of player, very skillful on the ball. So again, if Arsenal can find a centre midfield pairing like what we spoke of, they can find the quality, another option to Smith Rowe, to play in that sort of number 10 or from wide in those attacking areas. Another player that I really like.
I think, like we've said, Arsenal don't have that attraction anymore. So no disrespect to clubs like Brighton and Norwich, but they're obviously not the top tier. So picking off those, the best players like Liverpool have done in recent years with people like Van Dijk and Lallana. If we can pick off the likes of Basuma and Buendia from those slightly lesser teams, but they're players that are certainly capable of playing higher up, then I think Arsenal are in a good position to rebuild, because I think it's unrealistic to look at the top clubs in Europe and in the Premier League and look to pick off those players for a sort of 5-year rebuild anyway. So yeah, Basuma and Buendia would be fantastic options for Arsenal, and I think I'd be, welcoming them with open arms if they joined Arsenal in the next few years anyway. Right, we'll move on then to the striking positions. And now the two players we've currently got up there, really, Lacazette and Aubameyang, are sort of, I think in 5 years' time they'll be come to the end, if not at the end of their careers, and maybe Lacazette is, I think there's quite a lot of rumours that he won't be at Arsenal after this summer, and obviously Aubameyang, if he doesn't sign a contract, then we'll have to try and get a couple of new players in anyway. A few players I've got written down here. First one is Dusan Vlahovic. Now, I might be getting a bit carried away, but I've seen a few headlines about him. He's only 21, 7 Serbia caps, 12 goals in 27 games, so it's not outstanding in the Serie A, but definitely an option for Arsenal. 6'2", scores all types of goals. For me, reminds me of watching someone like Giroud. The other one would be Odsonne Edouard. Now, for me, he's probably the striker that I've seen the most of. He's been fantastic. Obviously, the Frenchman, I think he can come and cement his place in the Arsenal team over the next few years. Last one is someone that I hadn't really heard of too much. It's my other brother mentioned him to me, Patson Daka. He built him up as the man who's taken over from Haaland, and actually his stats back that up completely. He's got 20 goals in 18 games for Salzburg in the Austrian league. For me, Arsenal are lacking a clinical striker right now, even with Aubameyang and Lacazette, especially Aubameyang over the last few months. And Lacazette sort of doesn't really get over 15 goals. I don't think he has in the whole time He's been at Arsenal. Out of those three, I think you know most about Odsonne Edouard. So, in your opinion, would he fit the bill as an Arsenal striker, I suppose?
I think if you're looking at a direct replacement for Alex Lacazette, then you'd say yes. I like him. Good goal scorer. Obviously scored goals while he's been at Celtic. Not clinical. You know, he scored 16 in 26 this year. I think his overall Celtic record is a goal every other game. And people will look at the Scottish League and maybe say, well, if you're a clinical striker and you're going to come in the Premier League, you're probably better than a goal in every game in the Scottish Prem. But you know, it's a harder league than many make out. And will he get more chances at Arsenal with the attacking options that maybe they have? You know, like you said, Arsenal need that nine that's going to put the ball in the net. I think in recent weeks, Lacazette's been good. I've really enjoyed watching him play, and we'll go on to him a bit later. Aubameyang obviously plays better from the left, and you know, even in the immediate future, there is need for that centre forward. I really like Odsonne Edouard, again, another player. I think he's linked with Inter Milan at the minute. He's been linked with a few other clubs. Could Arsenal tempt him to come south? I'd imagine yes, but it'd be interesting to see what other options he maybe has.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, for me, Odsonne Edouard's been, you know, decent at Celtic. Obviously, he had to take over from Dembele there, so that was quite a difficult role to sort of take on. I definitely agree with you in terms of a straight replacement for Lacazette if he does leave in the next year or two. And he's only 23, Edouard. I just looked up, so 5 years' time, 28, he'll be in his prime years as a striker. So maybe he could be the man that comes in to help Arsenal's striking struggles. The other two, we won't touch on too much, or you know, like I said, Vlahovic and Daka, we don't know too much about, but I think for Daka especially, the record speaks for itself. You know, 20 goals in 18 games.
Unbelievable record, yeah.
Yeah. So even though it's in the Austrian league, I think for me, that's superb. And actually, it doesn't matter what league you play in. If you're a goal scorer, you're a goal scorer. So fair play. And I haven't really seen too much in terms of rumours, like I had with Edouard over the last couple of years. But you never know. I suppose, like we've said, it's a 5-year thing. And at the end of the day, there's a hell of a lot of players that Arsenal could recruit.
He's probably linked with Man United, because every player is linked with Man United. So
yeah, sounds about right. To be honest. Yeah, a lot of options we've discussed there for Arsenal in a 5-year rebuild. Obviously, there's so many more we could go into detail, but I don't think we want to ramble too much more. I think we've got quite a good few options there. Looking at goalkeepers, Meslier, Hakimi maybe coming in, Ben White maybe, Basuma, Buendia. Look at the strikers. You've got Edouard, maybe Daka. There's a lot of options for Arsenal, and I think like we've said, many times, they don't have the attraction that they once had. So picking off players from the slightly smaller clubs, again, no disrespect to the likes of Celtic, but I think Edouard would be attracted to come down south and play for Arsenal, and I think most of these players would, just on the history of the club and what we've achieved. Right, that was good. We'll move on to. Right, I think we're probably about midway through. We'll move on to the scout. Obviously, we missed the game week last week because we didn't have an episode. But we'll quickly just talk about the last picks we made. For me, that was Leandro Trossard for Brighton. I'm very pleased that he, finally got a decent pick. He got a goal and assist. And I did say if Brighton wanted to pull 6 points away from that relegation zone, then he'd have a big impact on it. And that's exactly what he did. 3-0 win at home to Newcastle. I think they're really being dragged into it, and they're playing a dangerous game there with Steve Bruce still in charge. Matt, Meslier, he did concede a goal against Fulham, but overall, I watched that game. He was absolutely fantastic. And it backs up what you said about a potential Arsenal goalkeeper in the next 5 years. He made a few outstanding saves. I can remember one in particular from Cavallero, close range. He's fired it and tipped it onto the post. It was a fantastic save. And really, ultimately, that's why Leeds got 2-1 win. So actually, for once, we've got a couple of good picks there. So well done. And I'm quite pleased with that as well. Right, we won't touch on the previous week's players just because that was a while ago now. But we'll have a look at our predictions for the upcoming week. Matt, I'll hand over to you your first player?
So I've gone with a player we've just spoken about, and that's Alex Lacazette. Now, a positive performance against West Ham. Arsenal come from obviously 3-0 behind. I'm giving him 2 goals. I know it probably wasn't maybe his goal, and I know it got taken off him, but done so well for that. Received the ball well, turn and finish, and obviously scored the equaliser, peeling away, great header. I think he's the one for Arsenal at the minute. I do fancy Arsenal have a chance to beat Liverpool on Saturday. It's the evening game. I know it'll probably be turned into a TikTok now. I've said that. But I do fancy Arsenal. I think a lot will depend on the fitness of Saka and Smith Rowe, which both look a major doubt, which is frustrating. But obviously Liverpool have not been in the best of forms of recent weeks. I know they're probably better away from home at the minute. And it's a massive game for Liverpool because they must win if they've got any chance of probably getting back into the top 4. So, but again, I think Arsenal going forward, if anyone's going to score a goal, it's going to be Alex Lacazette. So I'm going to go for him.
Yeah, at the moment, Alex Lacazette, I think he's got a good chance going in and scoring a few goals. We look at Aubameyang, and his form hasn't been great over the last few weeks. I know he scored a goal. I think it was either this week or last week for Gabon. But I don't think you can really judge it off that because the sites, the sorts of teams that they play is nothing compared to a Liverpool. So yeah, good shout. I'm hoping Arsenal get the win, obviously, as a fan, but I think it'll be an interesting game with Liverpool away from home are a completely different side, in my opinion. Right, my player is Timo Werner. Slightly controversial again. This will probably come back to bite me, but I'm going with him anyway. Chelsea home to West Brom. I think it's a great chance for him to try and make his mark. I'm feeling a goal or 2 for him maybe this weekend against a West Brom side deflated and pretty much relegated already, and probably just looking to find a successful way forward in the Championship next year. So yeah, Werner and Lacazette, 2 strikers this week. Always risky to go for it with a striker. I know you've had decent, I'm not going to say luck, but decent judgment with Henderson and Meslier in the last few weeks. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. Right, we'll move on then. What is up next? Let's have a look. If my laptop decides to work. Right, league positions. This is a difficult one to predict. I'm going to have a look at the league position, obviously the Premier League, FA Cup and League Cup, where we could get to. For me, I've gone with 3rd in the Premier League. Now, I think Arsenal have time to build over the next 5 years. If we keep Arteta in charge and obviously hold on to the better players, the likes of Saka, Smith Rowe and Martinelli that are, in my opinion, only going to get better, and then build on that with the players we've already mentioned, I think we've got a good chance of being back at the top and certainly fighting for the top 4 and maybe even the Premier League. But like I said, it really depends on how the recruitment goes. Would you say, in your opinion, obviously you haven't done a prediction, but would you say we could finish higher than that or maybe slightly lower than that? I'd like to think we'll be in the top 6 in 5 years' time, because if not, that's a bit of a travesty.
I think it doesn't necessarily depend on Arsenal, but probably depends on other teams with better resources. The likes of Man City, you can't see the money running out anytime soon. Man United will always be a massive club with a massive pool to get the best players in and with the finances to do it. And look at Chelsea last summer, spent well over 200 million, and Abramovich doesn't look like he's going away. So I think all depend probably on that more so than on Arsenal. Like you said, I think Arsenal got time to build and they can build around their young players, but it doesn't mean that clubs aren't going to go out and just bring in the best current talent around at the time, spend the big money to get there. But Arsenal, especially under Mikel Arteta, have to be aiming to get back in that top 4. It's a massive thing for the club to get back in the Champions League. For years, we were ridiculed because that was where we wanted to finish, and and a lot of people laughed at Arsene Wenger now. And it's funny now that every season it's very much geared up to the top 4 and getting in the top 4, and how much of a bad thing it is finishing 5th and missing out on that 4th place. So Arsenal have to, before they can even think about getting back and being around title challenges, they need to get themselves in the top 4. They probably need to get themselves back in the top 6 as things stand at the minute, and that will take time. So, but But again, they've got some good young talent coming through. If they can mix that with some good transfers, then they certainly have the chance. I think, we talk about Arsenal maybe not having the pulling power of these big clubs, but, we can reel off some of the players that they've brought in recent times. Kieran Tierney was looked at by many clubs. Thomas Partey is a great signing to bring in. A bit further back, they've brought in Aubameyang, who was a massive signing and a clinical, proven striker who's got a lot of goals in the Bundesliga, and a lot of clubs would have been interested in. And the fact Arsenal were able to get him, over, and they didn't have Champions League football then. He's never played Champions League football for Arsenal, so the fact that they were able to recruit those sort of players without Champions League football shows that there is still, Arsenal's still a club that can bring in good players. So, again, massively dependent on recruitment, but they certainly got a good chance.
Just want to quickly say full credit to Arsene Wenger on that, because it was only the last couple of seasons he was in charge where we didn't manage to qualify the Champions League with some, I think it's fair to say, below par squads. So yeah, hopefully in 5 years' time we'll be back up there and competing for the top. But like you've said, I think you made a good point. It really does come down to the Cities, Liverpools, Chelseas, depending on how they recruit, and Tottenham as well. If they do get back up there, I think it'll be an interesting one to see how Arsenal fare. Right, the last couple of ones we'll go over quite quickly, because I think obviously they're very difficult to judge. It's year by year. FA Cup, I've gone with semi-finals. I think it's a competition that we're generally quite good in. And actually at Wembley we're pretty good. But yeah, it's a difficult one to judge. League Cup quarterfinals, for me, it's a competition that we're not great in. I think we've only reached a couple of finals in the last 10 years. I think one was against Birmingham, was a disappointing defeat. And then the other was against Man City, where they just took us to the cleaners. So a competition I'm not too confident in, but you never know how the next 5 years will go. Move on to the next major section of this, and we're going to look at the young and upcoming players. So for every team, we'll be picking 5 of the players who we think may have a chance of cementing a spot in their first teams over the next 5 years. Obviously, it goes without saying, we've already mentioned Saka and Smith Rowe. I won't mention them because they're the younger players that I think we both obviously hope that we keep hold of and continue to improve their game. I've gone with this 5 though. Balogun, who we've already mentioned, looks pretty good in the Europa League, clinical for the under-23, scores many goals. Miguel Aziz coming through. I think he's an attacking midfielder. Very good. I know he scores quite a few goals and assists Balogun on a regular basis. Omari Hutchinson, slightly younger. I think he's under 18. Wonder of a left foot, so it'll be interesting to see how he progresses. I know he was quite high up the pitch, and I think he's slightly dropped back over the last season. Omar Rekik, who's the brother of the established Bundesliga defender Karim Rekik. Be interesting to see how he goes, because again, he's another option for the future, I think, if he does continue to grow and become better than hopefully his brother has in the Bundesliga. The other one is Tyrese John-Jules, still quite young, loaned out to Doncaster. I think he might be injured at the moment, actually. But 5 years' time, you never know. There's a lot of players here that I could have picked from. I've gone with these 5. In your opinion, is there any that you think could really cement their place in the Arsenal starting 11?
Very, very difficult to say. I think you've picked players there that have either, shown glimpses, especially in the under-23s. Someone like Miguel Aziz, technically a very good player. We've seen some clips of him that float around social media. Looks a real talent. Let's see if he can make that step up to the first team. Obviously, they brought in Omar Rekik, I think, from Hertha Berlin. Be interesting. Again, another one that obviously they like enough to bring across to the club. John-Jules is an interesting one. Obviously had a loan with Lincoln and now Doncaster. Was actually part of the Community Shield squad in the summer against Liverpool. But still a young striker, 20-year-old. Obviously scored goals for England at youth level as well. So be interesting to see what happens there. I think, when they do go out on those loans and they haven't broke into the first team at 20, it's not necessarily the best sign. But, there's great examples across the, football that, someone like Harry Kane, who had quite a lot of loans, and then broke into the first team. So it'll be interesting. I say he hasn't really torn it up at either Lincoln or Doncaster, or by not playing loads of games, but yeah, possibly one that maybe will bypass and maybe move on. But I think Aziz out of that group is probably the one to be really excited about, and obviously we spoke about Balogun as well.
I think you're right. It's so hard to predict these. I've obviously just come up with 5 to discuss, but like you said, Harry Kane. I think if you said to a Tottenham fan in 2014 that in 5 years' time he'll be nearing the club records, in terms of top goal scorer, I think they would have laughed in your face. And then the other one I think for me is Jamie Vardy. I think in 2011, if you said in 5 years' time you'll be champions of England with Leicester, well, just no one would have predicted it. So again, all these players can develop at different rates, and you just don't know. I mean, you could, Tyrus John-Jules could spend his early years sort of until mid-20s in the Championship, and then all of a sudden come up to the Premier League and really prove his worth. So it's different with all these players. I think you're right in saying Miguel Aziz is probably the most promising. I've seen a lot of him along with Balogun, and he's very much impressed me in the under-23s for Arsenal. So hopefully in the next year or two he'll get a chance in the first team. I'm sure he will, and hopefully we can keep hold of Balogun, because obviously there's a lot of rumours going around that he could be off this summer. A lot of interest, I think, most notably from Liverpool actually back in January as well. So yeah, a lot of players here, a lot of potential. I think it will be a difficult one to sort of assess how they will be in 5 years, but I'm hoping at least 1 or 2 of these will break into the Arsenal team and hopefully help the 5-year rebuild. Right, the final thing we'll move on to before I discuss the sort of end squad that I put together would be the manager. Now, for me, Arteta is very divisive. He started pretty well, obviously won the FA Cup, and then from late October through to December had, in my opinion, the worst patch Arsenal have had in the last 10, 15 years quite easily. So, there's some people that want him in, some people that don't. I've got a few names here. Maybe Allegri could come in. I'd love to see Henry head up the Arsenal Revolution, but he hasn't had too much success as a manager. A couple of other names, Vieira, again, not so successful. And for me, maybe the standout, along with Allegri, is another established manager in Brendan Rodgers. And obviously, he's had a lot of success. First, obviously, he missed out with Liverpool, went to Celtic, won a lot of things, come back to Leicester and really been fantastic there. Is there any of those 4 names that you'd like to see maybe in charge of Arsenal if Arteta does leave or get sacked or get offered a better job in the next 4 or 5 years?
I think the next year will be a key for Arteta. If he's still Arsenal manager in the next year, he'll be Arsenal manager in 5 years. I think that's the way we look at it, because I think the club would have then really given him the opportunity to go and stamp his mark on the team, which he is doing. And I think we've got to sometimes remember that he's been at the club. I know we've gone through a pandemic, but he's been at the club for over a year now. Coming up to a year and a half, it will be by the end of the season. So he's been there a long time, maybe not been able to do all the business he wants, but I mean, the summer was positive with the players he brought in. The January window was extremely positive with the players he was able to move on. If he was to move on for whatever reason, and like you said, he had a real tough time before Christmas. So, the names you mentioned, Allegri seems to be, in terms of what the experience and what he could bring. I know a lot of Arsenal fans were keen to have him, not only when Arteta was given the job, but when Unai Emery was given the job. I think Henry is the romantic option. Same probably with Patrick Vieira as well. To have them back, and Chelsea tried it with Frank Lampard, and obviously, unfortunately, didn't work. There's always a talk: do you ruin the legacy by going back and being the manager? They certainly will get more time because it is Thierry Henry, and he's no doubt the greatest player to play for Arsenal. So I think they are the romantic options: your Henry or Vieira. Brendan Rodgers, like you said, has been brilliant for Leicester, and he obviously learnt a lot. First of all, his time at Liverpool, and then going to Celtic and turned himself into a winning manager, and again had to test himself, come back to the Premier League, and he's got a great squad at Leicester. They've got great values. I think whenever you listen to, especially I think Maddison speaks so well of Rodgers and his regime and how they go about things and their non-negotiables, which is an Arteta phrase, but Brendan Rodgers really has that in his team. You can see it whenever they play. So I'd love to. I mean, in terms of quality football managers, I'd say Allegri or Rodgers certainly would be fantastic. Mm-hmm. As an Arsenal fan, to see Thierry Henry in the dugout or Vieira in the dugout, if they were the right candidates, obviously they've got to be the right candidates, and between now and whenever that day comes, they've got to get that managerial experience. Then, that would also be fantastic.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, for me, Allegri and Brendan Rodgers are right up there with some of the best managers in the world at the moment. Henry and Vieira, like you said, are romantic options. I'd love to see them as well. But at the end of the day, if it is Arteta, Allegri, whoever it is, I just want Arsenal to progress and in 5 years be the team that they were back in sort of 2007-8, challenging for the league. That's all I ask, really. Right, it's been a decent episode. I've enjoyed this. We'll conclude with the squads then that I've put together. I've added to it during the episode as well. It's a very difficult squad to put together, but I'll go for it anyway. It's 27 man in here, 3 strikers as well, so that probably won't happen. Right, goalkeepers: Leno, Raya, and Meslier. For me, Meslier first choice. Defenders: Gabriel, Soyuncu, Demiral, Omar Rekik. Saliba, maybe I've put him in there. Soyuncu or Ben White. Maybe Maitland-Niles, Tierney, and hopefully Achraf Hakimi this summer. Midfielders, pretty light, we're looking at that. Partey, Bissouma, Smith Rowe, Willock, Buendia, and then obviously Guendouzi is a maybe or maybe not at the moment. Attacking players, Saka, Martinelli, Balogun. Obviously Aziz is sort of a midfielder, but put him in that attacking bracket because of his number 10 position. Amari Hutchinson, Nelson, Vlahovic, Edouard, or Daka. For me, that would be a decent squad going forward, and obviously that's quite a lot to ask there in terms of recruitment. But if Arsenal can get a squad similar to that caliber together in the next 5 years, obviously we don't know how players are going to progress. It could turn out that someone like an Aziz doesn't fulfil their potential, like we've seen with so many players. So be interesting to see what happens. That's all there is to this episode, really. I've really enjoyed it, mate. I think I'll put a poll up on Instagram to get other people voting on their clubs that they want to see. I think it's always interesting to look at where it could be in 5 years' time because, like I said, there's so many players. I just use a couple of examples of Vardy, and you mentioned Kane, that 5 years before their success, no one will be able to see it coming. So I think it's a really interesting thing to delve into. Make sure you look out for that poll on Instagram if you want to vote for your club. We might put a little club v club up, so it makes it slightly easier, and obviously ones that we know a bit more about. But yeah, Matt, it's been lovely having you on, mate, as ever. It's been a good episode, and hopefully we can continue with these in the next few weeks if it does get received well. Cheers, thanks for having you on, mate.
No, been good, enjoyed it. Be interesting to see in 5 years' time where Arsenal are at and where some of those players are at.
Definitely, I'm hoping we'll be at the top, but it's Arsenal, so I think 5 years ago we wouldn't predict where we'd be right now. All right, guys, I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Anyway, check us out on Spotify and YouTube. Obviously, you can see us now face to face. And in the next 4 weeks, we'll be getting together, and hopefully the podcast will be slightly better quality as well. So yeah, hope you've enjoyed, guys. Keep talking football.